Okay, today I've got a little bit of it's going to feel a little frantic. I'm going to go over Cursor AI, which is a development environment. If you've ever had that feeling that you needed a little bit of assistance, let's say that, when you're typing a text to somebody and it gives you the next word or autocorrects, hopefully correctly into the right word, that's just this assistive technology. Cursor AI for development is just the exact same thing. We're going to go through a whole bunch of different things that it can do to kind of describe how useful it is to both seasoned engineers and beginners. If you're just beginning your journey here and wondering what this thing's all about, I go through several examples of quick, silly vibe coding to show you some of the very fast ways that you can enjoy it and have fun to get started, but also maybe an idea of how you might move forward and really grow into vibe coding and more into an engineering experience anyway. And anybody that's in the middle wondering, is this for me? Is this a bunch of hype? I try to kind of at least expose what they can do just as a tool and take a lot of the hype away. You'll hear a lot of the vibe coding fun stuff. And for those that are already a little leery of these tools, vibe coding kind of is nails on a chalkboard to them. So I understand that, and I'm going to show some real functional mechanisms. So there's a little bit for everybody in here, and I had to mix it up a bunch so that it kind of kept some interest for everybody, but it's going to kind of jump around a little bit. Let's go take a look at all of the different things that something like Cursor AI and these other tools can bring you. Really the assistive technology and the real growth of where computer programming is going to be, or engineering in the future. I think it's highly worth it. I am entirely adopting these tools, so it's worth at least you understanding what they're about and taking a look. So let's dive in and see what Cursor AI has to offer. Okay, very quickly before we begin, I want to show you the two tools that I'm really going to be showing here. You can come out to cursor.com, download it for free, install it, and give it a shot. It's definitely worth at least taking a look at. The other tool that I'm going to be using, and you might see me using it and hear me using it, but you won't know, is something called Super Whisper. This is just a method for me to be able to talk to the computer instead of typing to it. Is a waveform like this will be at the top of the screen, and when I'm done and I turn it off, it will take that text and insert it wherever my cursor is. Let's get in and have some fun. Writing just a little bit of JavaScript. If I start and say print, and it says, oh, there is no print in JavaScript. So this is the first injection that's occurring here. And it's saying, oh, do you mean console log hello world? I do. And if I hit tab, it will replace with that. So that's great. You can see as I hit enter, it starts to kind of anticipate what I might be doing in this file. You see this ghosted text down here, this kind of suggested text. If I hit tab, that will accept it. And once I've done that, Cursor wakes up and goes, what's likely? What's the next thing that they're likely to do? And if I want to do that, I can hit tab again. So this idea of tabbing to be able to complete is really a core principle. Admittedly, we now have something that prints out a student. We may not have wanted this, but it had no context. And that's an important idea. These agentic systems and all intelligent systems are kind of using the information you give to it to then make next predictions, essentially. And since we've given it literally nothing but that console log hello world line, it doesn't know what to do, so it's trying to do its best. It's doing its best to figure out what might be next, and so it's just giving us kind of a template of the way you might write an application. So let's see that same thing in a Python file. If I type H at this point, it's going to do print hello world, which is curious. You'll notice the name of the file is also hello, and it may have context to this file behind it. This thing's looking around at all the other stuff that's been written and trying to use what's already there or write what it's writing in the same way. So in this case, it's giving us this hello world. And of course, it comes out and gives us the exact same thing that was in that original JS file, because that's the context it has at this point. So its next best possible thing, instead of being completely random like it was the first time, is saying, well, let me go use what they have in this project already. That's a better guess than the completely random. Okay, here we go. I want to create a single page, kind of HTML, single page that I can drag into a browser and run. I kind of want to make a color picker of some kind, but make it a little cool in some way. Like maybe if you had a 10 by 10 grid or more than that, and anywhere on the grid I could click and it would assign the color. And then if I double click, it'll pull up the color picker or some other mechanism. Just let me do a color picker somehow on the page. Let's take a look. Okay. Perfect. This is a file in JavaScript that I don't know exactly what it's doing. If I hit enter, you'll see Command I to chat and Command K to generate. So if I Command K here, it will come up with one disclosure. What it's really trying to do is do file level controls or make changes specifically to this file. So what we're going to do, since I just want to change something here in this file, I'm going to use this Command K option here. Let's say, this thing is pretty confusing. Can you at least change all the variable names to something better than just single letter variable names? And so that was me using that super whisper thing. It's the last time I'll describe that. And so now I'm asking it just to change the single letter variable names inside of this. And we will hit generate. It's saying, this is the change that I would advise. I can accept that change. As you'll see in this case, we've just duplicated this function. And maybe we didn't mean to duplicate it, maybe we did, but we now have it twice in our code. And I will remove this to remove the complexity because you were at a bare line when you called it. You're saying, at this line, I want you to make a change. What it's really asking for is a context or a focus selection or something like that. So if you really want to make a change within a given file, you might use this mechanism in Command K here and then say, replace the single character variable names with logical variable names, please. In this case, what it's doing is actually removing the old and replacing it with the new and giving me the option to either accept it or reject it as a change. So it gives me a chance to kind of see what we call the diff or the difference between the green being added and the red being removed. So if I accept this here, or if I accept it here, or if I hit Command Enter to accept it, they're all the same. I still might not understand what's going on here. And in that case, that's when we might want to have a conversation with this code or about this code. So I'm going to pull open Command I, and if you noticed, the way I've discovered Command I, in their ghosted disclosure here, they have Command K, so it's always trying to remind you of some of these hotkeys. But Command I pulls open a chat window. In Cursor, the panels here are represented by icons at the top. So you'll see this here and it's saying we're in agent mode. There's multiple modes. If I wanted to be in ask mode and I just wanted to have conversations about the code that was here, this is basically your normal ChatGPT window. This is having a chatbot that you can talk about this code. And here we might say, I don't really understand what this function is doing. Can you describe it to me? And it, of course, will attempt to see the function that you have reference to, but we haven't given it reference to this file. So this is an important detail. When you're in chat mode and not in the agentic mode, when I start a new window, if I just hit this plus to start a new chat, that's all I'm doing, what it will do is pull in the tab that is active. So it normally would have had this already active at the top of the window here, and that's actually a way that it's giving context to this conversation. So now if I ask the same question, I don't really understand what this function is doing. Can you describe it to me, please? Now we've basically said in this chat window, you have the privilege to talk to me about this stuff or read this stuff on my behalf. The other mode that we'll get to a little bit later, which is that agent mode, that doesn't need quite as much of that giving it explicit context. It helps a lot. So understanding that in these systems, you might have to say, I'm talking about this one particular thing or this file or this folder or something like that. That helps quite a bit to focus its mind. Okay, I need another application that I can drag into a browser on a single page application, single HTML page that I can pull into a browser and run. And what I'm looking for is something, something really pretty, very gentle. Let's say maybe it's in a canvas environment or something like that. What I want you to draw is a curved rainbow. And I want this rainbow to allow me to drag the different bands of the colors to resize them, to make them bigger or smaller, something like that. Can you do something like that? Okay, let's look. Ooh, wow. Okay, let's see. What's going on here? Let's see. Oh, all right. So I can select. Wow. I don't fully understand it, but it is kind of awesome. Oh, awesome. Yes. All right. So I've opened another JavaScript file and it is obviously complex. Let me say, describe what this is doing, kick that off. It'll come back and tell me about this. That's all fine and good. I might then ask another question, even while it's still thinking. Do you think you can clean this up a little bit? I don't really need it rewritten, but the variable names at least would be helpful to be able to understand what they are. It's very complicated to understand what each one of these variables is since it's just a single value. Okay, and that's my example of if you talk to your computer, you'll give it much better context. And so now it knows what I find complicated about it. it might have assumed that what I found complicated about it was the way that we're using modulus or shortcuts within these lines or arrow functions or other things that are a little bit complicated. So what you find complicated about it versus what I find complicated about it may be two very different things. Remember that we're still in ask mode on this, right? So we're not really in please go make changes for me on the fly and I can't keep track of what you're doing. But I just had a conversation with it saying it feels obscure. Can you help me make sense of it? And it came back and said, sure, absolutely. Here is how I would make these changes. I think these are the good ideas that you should do to make these changes. It did not make those changes. It's worth noting because later we will see it make these changes for us. So it didn't make those changes. I can copy these changes and then come over here and paste them in as I like. Obviously, I can copy them in here if I like by hand, or I can hit this button that is Apply to Complex.js. Okay, so now very quickly, let's just give it a shot and hit the Apply to Complex and see if it'll apply the changes for us. You can accept all, you can apply all, kind of the same in this context. So what I will do is I'll accept everything and say, this is our new change. This apply all, they happened to have a comment at the bottom that they were advising also. So let me come and reject this one. So in fact, I'll use this button to reject it and say, well, I accidentally hit reply all. I didn't like that change. So that's the change made, right? Now we've made this change. But what happens if you end up making a change that you don't like? And this continues. This is always available to you. This is not just when you make the change. I want you to see this. Command Z is everybody's friend, especially in the coding world. Check this out. Cursor also makes checkpoints that you can restore to in all of your chats and in all of your changes when you're working with the agent, whether you're working with the ask agent here. So there's this restore checkpoint mechanism that we can restore up to this point. And it will say, you sure you want to undo that? And it'll flop back to what it was. So you can always recover back to where you were when you need to. All right, let's talk about another way that you can make changes. This is kind of cool, frankly. Let's imagine I've just written a new Python file called counterpy, and I might want to write a function that counts from 0 to some number and prints it out. That might be something that I want to do in Python, but I don't really know how. So I can come over here, we've seen this, and ask the question, how would I write a function that does this? But we're gonna do this a different way, and sometimes this is far quicker and easier to do, especially if you're in the editor window and you're editing things. You might come over here and drop a comment and say, I need to create a function that takes in a number, and that's the start number, and I want to count up to 200, but I want to make sure that the start number is at least below 200 before we start. I don't want to get into a place where I'm counting forever because we started at a number above it. And when I hit enter, Cursor took that as the context of this page and said, well, okay, I understand exactly what you want to do. If I hit tab, I now have that function. So comments can also be a way that you drive your development. You might be able to describe a piece. Let's say, I want to print out every time we go to a new number. I'm not sure how to do that. And I will scroll back for a second because it's a very long comment. In fact, let me use our collapse mechanisms that we've seen and then scroll back. And so I haven't even hit enter yet, and Cursor has come up with this idea of what I should do. Now I can hit enter, or I can just hit tab. Now I've selected it, it will print it out. So it's that kind of thing that inline while you're coding, you can get a lot of very fast assistance. Okay, as I mentioned, I had Cursor create all these files. I really don't know what this is doing, so let me ask. Can you give me kind of a functional definition here, some kind of comment that describes what this function is trying to do? I can't really tell what it's doing. So it's going to go through and read the function, analyze it, figure out what it's doing, create a comment. And remember, we're still in this ask mode, so it's not actually going to do anything. It's just going to give us the code that it would advise. And then of course, it'll give us the readout of exactly what it thinks it's doing. So what I will do is apply this. This still feels more complicated than maybe it needs to be for what all it's doing. So let's ask it to simplify things or see if it can be simplified. This just feels highly complicated. I don't know if this is the most efficient way for this function to have been written. Can you go look at it and see if maybe you can refactor it or clean it up and make it a little bit easier? Yep, that's going to be easier. All right. So what it's advising is this code versus this code. Excellent. But what's important, certainly from the takeaways that we have so far, is you can actually ask questions about what's sitting there, and it will tell it to you in plain language. You may not care because we're still at code level, right? We're still saying, tell me what that function does. And to be asking about a function means you're deep inside the code. But in any case, let's apply this, of course, because we definitely want that code much shorter, easier to understand, and at this point, fully documented. So that's excellent. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, here we are. Last one here for the few files thing. So we have a function here. We might not even know what this thing does. And I'm going to do this inline and say, please create me a sample data set of mock data that I can use to exercise this function with. You can see below that it's already advising some data to be put in. So I'm going to hit tab and then hit enter and tab a couple times. There you go. So it has now created the sample data, but what's interesting about this, of course it can create sample data, that's not real surprising, is it had to go through this function and fully understand that it needed city and value as the different properties inside of an object. So if you have complex functions that have an implicit internal structure to it, this really can help you understand what the data looks like. You might not ever need to run this, but now I kind of can at least look at it and go, oh, that's the kind of thing it's expecting. Okay, and I could even just put this in as a comment and say, well, it's kind of something like that. And leaving this in my code, maybe later the next person in, or really in reality, the next AI in, will be able to compare these two together as changes occur. And we'll see this in a second, that we can ask AI whether or not the function that's sitting there still matches to the spec or matches to the data. So you got an idea. Okay, I'm going to ask you for a hard one here. What I'm looking for is an application that can run in a single HTML page. I kind of want it to be creative and interesting, but what I'm looking for is some kind of environment that little animals can walk around. Now, these little animals, I think you can represent them with like emoji or something like that, but what I'm interested in is they don't have to just be walking animals. I'm interested in their danger level, so the more dangerous maybe the larger they are or something like that. I don't really know. And as they get closer to each other, some animals, maybe the predators, eat the others, but if there's a whole bunch of the others, they chase the predators off if they're in small groups, so it makes groups kind of collect together and stay away from each other or something like that, and kind of make the environment that they're walking around in a little bit interesting. I don't really know about this, but I'd also like a couple other things. I'd like to know in general, like how many of all of the different counts of animals there are, maybe some kind of scoreboard of some kind, but also I think a slider that I can make it to more and less dangerous environment or something like that. I don't really know what I'm looking for, so just have some fun and thrill me. Yeah, no possible way. Let's take a look. Oh, wow. What? Oh, look at that radius, and oh, I love this. What's going on here? Somebody ate somebody. Let's add some animals. I don't have any idea what's going on. Oh, the wolf ate somebody. Oh, this is awesome. It tells me how dangerous each one of these animals is. Group formation strength. Let's kick that up. Let's get some speed. And let's get some animals, of course. Group defends against the wolf. Get him, ducks. I don't have any idea what's going on. All right, let's clear. Let's add a bunch of animals. And we got to knock it up a little bit here. Here we go. Yeah. I don't know what's going on with this jitter. Excellent. Okay, here we are in small program. I'm in an index file. It's called small program because it has a little bit more sophisticated pattern to it. It's importing some files. And what I wanted to show is what Cursor does, one of its neat little tricks. As there are changes elsewhere in your file, it's asking you to hit the tab key to go to that location and accept the change there. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to actually try to create a new console log statement that we have here and use a function that is not yet imported. Const today is today's date. All right, and I will hit tab. When I hit that, you'll see this underline that says, oh, there's a problem with this. This one's worth pausing on for just a moment. If you mouse over them, you will see that there's this blue button called Fix in Chat. This one's excellent. So if you have something going on in your code and you're saying, why is this an error? Let me figure this out. We can show that here, that you'll see, oh, what shows up is line 16 to 18 where that error was occurring. And it says, hey, for this is the problem that I was having. What would I do? So what I'll do is I'll reject that change so it's not here. We'll clear this and come back over here. I'll close this so you can see I'm only here. And what it's telling me is if I hit tab, it'll jump up here, and then it's going to be advising me of this line. So I'm going to hit tab. It's going to put me up at that point, And then it's giving me ghosted text that I can just hit tab for again. This now works. So very neat idea that it just will tab, tab, tab. Sometimes you can just hit tab 10 times in a file as it moves you around. Here's another one. We're in this function called array stats. And what we've got here is pretty good documentation saying that this calculates the sum of the numbers, the average, the maximum, the min. And you can see that here, sum, average, max, min. And it's also returning sum, average, max, min for what it's worth. What I'm going to do in here is add a new one. So you can see it's already advising me to do so. So I'm going to hit tab, and now we have median, hit enter, and you can see that the tabber is saying, oh, you probably should put a comma and median down here. So I'll hit tab, which puts that in. And so now we're in a good place, but it doesn't quite match up with our documentation here. So if I just go into the documentation to remind it, hey, take a look at the documentation, you'll see that it drops in a thing that says, oh, now we might want the median of all numbers. That's kind of neat, but what if I did that the other way around? Let's say we wanted to add the mode of the numbers. And it's obviously telling me I want to jump tab here. Tab is accept. So I'm going to hit tab, and now it's got median and mode. It's also telling me to jump here for tab. It's going to create the object called mode, and it's going to create an implementation to get mode. That's great. And now it's telling me mode's not used and tab to jump here. And this is the tab, tab, tab. All I've done is put a comment up at the top, but you get the point. So it's just kind of moving it all the way through. Okay, last one in here, and then we'll create something with our agent. We have a function or a class or an implementation, in fact, multiple files that represent it, something like that. But we also have a specification in here. So I've written a markdown document in here that describes what the specification, here's what should be input, here's the analysis that should be done, here's the output format, here's some examples. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the agent system over here, which we have not really seen yet, and say, all right, so I'm even going to get rid of this to show you what can happen. If I have no context to this, since I'm in agent mode means it has context to your project, basically. So I'm going to say, I have a user distribution system, and I want to make sure that it matches its spec. Let's try that first. This is about as plain as it can possibly be. I'm not going to guide it much at all. Hey, I have a function that analyzes user distribution in here, and I kind of want to make sure that it matches the spec as defined. So I will warn you, the other thing that happens in agent mode is it makes changes, right? So this may actually go ahead and actually start making changes if they don't match. I don't even know if they match. We'll find out. That's the idea of agent. It's going to look around in my project. You'll see it in a second. It's going to kind of say, oh, I'm looking around. I'm trying to analyze your system to figure out what you're talking about. Found the spec, found the implementation. Let me make sure that they're doing the same things. Looks like something's missing. Let me add some stuff. That's my guess. Maybe not. I can see there's a discrepancy. So it said, I'll help you analyze. I can see there's a discrepancy. It's missing the age distribution analysis that's required according to the spec. Let me edit the file to include the missing age distribution functionality. And of course it goes through and creates 28 lines of change and removes 3 of them. So that's what is in here. If we look through all of this, this is the added code that it came in and put in. Now, as you recall, it still has a checkpoint that we could, of course, we've only made one change. So even at the bottom, we can just reject it, and that will reject up to the last checkpoint. Or at any given time, had this been a multiple step conversation that we were having, we could go back to any one of these checkpoints. But I like these changes. I think this is correct. It's just a neat way to imagine having your documentation actually be representative of the code or vice versa. This can work the other way. I have a new implementation of analyze user distribution. Can you go make sure the documentation reflects the changes? That will actually work. It's fantastic. So it's these kinds of things that we haven't had that easy mechanism to do this sort of thing in the past. It really starts to hint at kind of some kind of definition-driven development at some point, that we might use spec as a more meaningful distribution or kind of conversation point to write code, those kinds of things. So it's very exciting in a lot of ways that I think many tools will start to explore. But this is just an example of even doing it here in Cursor, where we're thinking of this as just a development tool. Okay, let's go big. Let's go really big. Okay, Cursor, I'm looking to build a full-blown web application here, and I have a really particular idea. I don't really care what stack you use. You're welcome to do any installs here. I would imagine you'll use NPM or JavaScript or something like that, but I don't care as long as it runs in a browser once we're done. So imagine a live breathing map of the US. where each state glows in real time based on people's mood. So we'll have to determine that in some way. So it should be graphical and interactive where users can zoom in and out of the map, smoothly transitioning between kind of the national and state level view at least. Maybe click on each state to see a small overlay with mood trends for that region. Again, all of this can be kind of dynamically rolled data, or it can be based on different things. Maybe we can select different data types or data sets depending upon different people's perspectives of things. So the dynamic mood visualization, each state should shift colors based on its dominant mood, like happy is warm tones and stressed is cool tones, that kind of stuff. And in our data, we can figure out why different areas might be stressed or happy. Maybe some silly ones like there's monsters near the Great Lakes. Of course, there's lake monsters, and then it's freezing cold in other places. So you get to use some fun with this. A subtle pulse animation to indicate recent mood updates would also be great. So I want to use some basic map framework. So I really want this to be graphical and clean. Colors update based on the mock data or any simple user input that you decide. And I want some smooth zooming and panning and clicking interactions to make it feel polished and alive. Give that a shot. This has no chance. Oh my goodness. 15 minutes and still running. All kinds of stuff going on in here. Okay, it finished. It did have a problem. It said I can't do the map of all the geo information for the US, so it only did a couple states. Let's find out what that means. Wow. Okay. What? The general mood, okay, of California. Awesome. And it's on a globe. Get out of here. Holy cow. Okay. Awesome. Great. Let's say social media sentiment. Let's see. California's pretty stressed out. Arizona's kind of angry. And I guess Georgia's somewhere in between. Or Alabama is in between. Weather impact? Angry. Ooh, monster sightings. Let's do monster sightings. Of course, we've got to do monster sightings. A lot of calm. Let's see. Stressed. There's some stressed people here in Arkansas. Let's go take a look at them. Oh, failure. Oh, that's too bad. So it doesn't quite work. Welcome to vibe coding. Need to go in, figure out what the error is, go back and forth with it a little bit. But still, I have to say, as a beginning, this is kind of excellent. Oh man, I want to know how different parts of the world feel about monster sightings. I've got to figure out how to finish this. This is awesome. Okay. Wow. Okay, so what I think we saw here was there's a lot of sides to something like Cursor, not surprisingly, and all of this is kind of new. There's several things in here that we had some plugins to be able to do in the past, but this really brings a whole bunch of things together and puts it into an intelligence that we've just never really seen before. And it's only going to get much, much bigger, as I've said. So I think that plus all this vibe coding and the introduction of new people into the tent, I think that's great. If you're new here and you're just trying to figure out how to get started in this space, or if you want to get a little bit better at vibe coding or move slowly into being able to work more elegantly with these systems and maybe even move into a little bit of engineering, I have another series of videos that I'm doing around vibe coding specifically and how to slowly move into that in a kind of formal fashion so that you're thinking about the things that an engineer might think about in a typical workflow and how to apply them to something like we just saw, which is kind of a nuts pattern of being able to say whatever you want and it breathes stuff to life. That's an amazing pattern, but we'd still want some structure around it, some control around it, because as your systems become more and more interesting and better, you want to still have control over them. They will spin out of control if you let them go too far to where you feel like you don't know how to recover them and you have to walk away from them. So that's something that I would say pay attention to as you move into vibe coding, but don't worry about it up front. If you're just starting, download Cursor, do exactly what I did, say one of these weird prompts to it, ask it to do something ridiculous. You heard some of the tricks that I use, like a single page HTML application or something like that, so that you can just drag it into a browser and see it and not have to worry about everything else. But you're also entirely welcome to say, I want to build a whole React system that does XYZ. It will do all of that. And for you advanced guys or girls out there, everybody that's working in an engineering space today or is training to become an engineer, those kinds of things, and wondering, what is this going to be? What does this mean to me? Do I need it? Hopefully this sheds some light on that for you. I think it's just another set of tools. For a while, you will still completely need to be in the loop. Eventually, you will be able to pull yourself out of some parts of those loops that aren't really what's important about your skill set to begin with. If you were just a typist before, maybe be scared. But if you're bringing any intelligence into the mix, we're still going to need that. All of these systems will need it. So don't get scared. Just imagine how to adopt this and adopt it now while it's moving forward. So I highly advise these systems. Cursor's a great system. The others are very similar as well, as I said. Thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.